Daniel Reyes was always up before the sun. At 5:30 every morning, while the city of Portland still slept under layers of fog and silence, Daniel slipped quietly out of the small apartment he shared with his 9-year-old daughter, Anna. His janitor's uniform was already on, thermos in hand, his breath visible in the crisp pre-dawn air. Being a single father meant working two jobs, mornings cleaning at Roosevelt High School and evenings fixing cars at Tony's Auto Repair. He never complained. Raising Anna alone after his wife's death was the hardest, most sacred thing he'd ever done. He worked long hours not just to pay rent or bills, but to protect that bright light in his life. His daughter's laughter, her curiosity, her belief in him. That particular morning felt no different. Daniel took his usual shortcut along the Willamette River, the path quiet except for the distant rumble of early morning trucks. Then he heard it, sharp, panicked screaming cutting through the fog. He froze. "Help! Somebody help!" Daniel scanned the riverbank, eyes narrowing against the mist. There, out on the thinning ice near the bend, someone was struggling, flailing in the freezing water. No one else was around. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He ran. Each step toward the ice was a gamble, the crackling beneath his boots growing louder as he approached. He dropped to his knees, inching forward, heart pounding. "I'm here! Hold on!" he called out. A pair of terrified eyes met his, wide, desperate, clinging to the edge of a broken ice sheet. Daniel reached out, gripping her wrist with all the strength he had left. She was freezing, barely conscious, but he held on, teeth clenched, muscles shaking from the cold. With a surge of energy, he pulled her toward him, inch by inch, until her soaked body slid across the edge of the riverbank. They collapsed together, gasping. Daniel didn't know then that the woman he had just pulled from the river was Camille Foster, the 28-year-old heiress to a billion-dollar tech empire who had vanished without a trace nearly 7 months ago. He only knew one thing. She needed help, and helping people. That was something he did know how to do. Daniel stumbled into the apartment just after 7 a.m., the chill of the river still wrapped around his bones. His clothes dripped water onto the cracked tile floor, leaving a trail behind him as he leaned heavily on the doorframe, fumbling with the lock. The door creaked open, and a familiar scent of toasted bread and lemon cleaner greeted him. But it was the sound that stopped him in his tracks. "Daddy?" Anna's voice rang out from the kitchen, high and sharp. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, her eyes widening at the sight of him, soaked, shivering, pale. "Daddy," she gasped, then bolted down the hallway. "I'll get your warm clothes." Before he could even say a word, her bedroom door slammed open. Daniel peeled off his wet jacket slowly, breath shallow from the cold, and the adrenaline still wearing off. His fingers were numb, his back throbbed. But he stood there waiting, because that's what dads do. Anna returned a moment later, carrying his warmest hoodie, oversized and well-worn, a faded blue thing that Maria had given him their last Christmas together. "Here," she said out of breath. "You're freezing." Daniel took it, managing a small smile. "Thanks, sunshine." As he pulled it over his head, the faint scent of Maria's perfume clung to the collar, something floral and warm, still there after all these years. It hit him in the chest harder than the cold had. "You're not supposed to go in the water," Anna said seriously. "At school, they said you're supposed to wait for the firefighters. That's what the safety lady told us." Daniel crouched a little, eye level with her. "I know, baby," he said gently, "but sometimes there's no time to wait." Anna nodded slowly, but her face was serious. She studied him the way Maria used to when she didn't quite believe his answer, but let it go anyway. Then without another word, she turned, walking toward the kitchen. And that's when it happened. There was a loud crack, ceramic against tile, and Daniel turned in time to see her pink piggy bank shattered on the floor. Coins scattered everywhere, dimes, nickels, even a few crumpled bills. Anna, What? She was already on her knees, scooping up quarters with shaking hands. I've been saving, she said, for something important, and I think this is important. Daniel swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. No, sweetheart, he said. That's your college fund. You've been working so hard for that. I know. She pushed the handful of change toward him anyway. But you helped that lady. You didn't even know her. Mom would have said we're supposed to help people. He had no argument, because she was right. Maria would have said the same thing, smiling through her pain, even on the hardest days. We help when we can. We give what we have. Daniel sat heavily at the table, exhausted, soaked socks squishing in his boots. The sun had crept into the room now, hitting the pile of unopened mail on the counter. The electric bill glared up at him in red. Rent was due in 4 days, and the truck was still dying, its engine light a constant reminder of how close to the edge they always lived. But right now, none of that mattered. Time for school, he said softly. I can stay if you're still cold, Anna offered. You've got a spelling test today, remember? He said, gently nudging her toward the bedroom. Go get your shoes on. I'll pack your lunch. He moved through the morning on autopilot, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, the last granola bar. His phone buzzed on the counter. Tony, can you cover tonight? Double pay. Daniel stared at it. His body was still aching from the rescue. But double pay meant maybe they'd make rent this month. He typed back, I'll be there. Anna reappeared in her purple hoodie, the one with the frayed sleeve he'd sewn. She looked up at him, her eyes still worried. You took your medicine? She asked, nodding at the empty bottle on the windowsill. Already did, he said, though they both knew it was a lie. They sat together, quietly finishing breakfast, the moment stretching out like a sigh. Daddy, Anna said suddenly, is the lady you saved going to be okay? Daniel looked out the window for a moment before answering. I hope so, he said. I really hope so. The bus honked. Anna hugged him fiercely. I'm proud of you. He closed his eyes, holding her tight. I'm proud of you too. She climbed onto the bus, waving as it turned the corner. And Daniel, still damp, still aching, still overwhelmed, stood in the doorway for a long time, not because he had the time to waste, but because something inside him knew. That woman in the river, Camille Foster, was going to change everything. By the time Daniel arrived at the office building where he worked his second job, the icy chill of the river still clung to his skin, despite the layers of dry clothes. He had changed into his janitor's uniform in the maintenance locker room, wiped down his boots and tried to steady his hands. But the weight of the morning's events still pressed down on him. He hadn't told anyone. Not Tony at the garage. Not the school secretary when he called to make sure Anna arrived safely. Not even the bus driver who'd asked why his coat was dripping at the bus stop. It had been simple. Someone needed help, and he helped. That should have been the end of it. But as he pushed his cleaning cart through the glass doors of the 20-story office tower downtown, he knew something had shifted. The lobby buzzed with a different energy. People whispering near the security desk, gathered in small clusters, clutching newspapers and cell phones. Then he saw it. Mystery woman rescued from Willamette River. Local hero disappears before recognition. The headline stretched across the front page of the Oregonian, displayed in the newsstand next to the elevators. Beneath it, a grainy photo showed flashing red lights at the riverbank and EMTs crouched beside a stretcher. Daniel stopped in his tracks. The photo had been taken just moments after he'd pulled Camille from the water. He recognized the tree, the broken ice, even the faded bench nearby. He hadn't even realized someone was taking pictures. His stomach tightened. "Mornin', Reyes," called Pete, the security guard, waving him over with a grin. Pete was holding a copy of the same paper, creased and underlined. "Come in through the river entrance today," he joked. Daniel managed a tight smile. "Something like that." Pete tapped the paper. "They're looking for the guy who pulled her out. Reporter came by asking if anyone saw him leave. Said the woman, some big tech heiress, Camille Foster, went missing last year. Nobody knows where she's been. Daniel's jaw clenched. I just do my job, Pete. Yeah, well, diving into frozen water ain't exactly in your job description. Pete chuckled, waving him through. Daniel nodded, rolling the cart toward the elevators, trying to breathe evenly. But the knot in his chest only grew tighter. By mid-morning, the story had made its way to local news stations. Co-workers whispered in hallways. His phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Somehow someone had figured it out. At lunch, he stepped outside to clear his head, only to be stopped by a woman in a tailored coat holding a microphone. Mr. Reyes? She asked brightly. KPTV, can we get a quick comment about the rescue? Daniel didn't answer. He turned and walked away, heart hammering. Back inside, he pulled out his phone and called the only place that mattered. Roosevelt Elementary, this is Karen. Hi, it's Daniel Reyes, just checking on Anna. Oh, Mr. Reyes, she said warmly. She's doing great. Actually, she told everyone about your rescue this morning during announcements. Daniel's blood ran cold. What? She said you saved someone in the river. The whole school's buzzing. I think she's pretty proud of you. His voice caught. Can you make sure no reporters get near her? Already turned away too, Karen said. Principal Evans is very strict about media on campus. She's safe. He thanked her and hung up, but his hand still trembled. Later that day, as he cleaned the third-floor restrooms, he heard a soft knock on the janitor's closet door. He opened it to find a woman in a navy blazer, a leather notebook in hand. Her eyes were sharp but calm. Mr. Reyes, she asked. He hesitated. Yeah? Detective Monica Patel, I need a few minutes of your time. He stepped back, letting her in. The mop handle leaned against the wall, still damp. This is about the woman you rescued, she said, flipping open her notebook. We believe she's someone we've been looking for. She pulled out a photo, Camille, younger and polished, standing in front of a foster tech banner. She's been missing for 7 months, disappeared without a trace until now. Daniel looked away. I didn't know who she was. I just heard someone screaming. You didn't know, Detective Patel said. But you helped anyway. He nodded slowly. That's what you do when someone's drowning. She studied him. The Foster family is influential. They'll want to thank you. I don't need thanks, he said flatly. I need to pick up my daughter after work. The detective paused. I understand, but Mr. Reyes, you've already stepped into their world, whether you want to or not. After she left, Daniel stood alone in the janitor's closet, her card still in his hand. The woman Camille had a name now, a story, a family, a fortune, 1,000 complications. He didn't want any part of it, but the memory of her hand gripping his in the icy water, that didn't feel like complication. That felt like connection. And somehow he knew. That one moment on the river wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The rhythmic beep of monitors pulled Camille Foster out of the darkness. She blinked slowly, the sterile white of a hospital ceiling coming into view. Her limbs felt heavy, her throat raw. For a moment she didn't know where she was or why her body ached like it had been crushed by ice. Then it all came back. The river, the cracking ice. The moment she let herself fall through, believing she'd finally found the only escape left. And then, hands. Strong, calloused hands gripping her wrists. A voice telling her to hold on. She turned her head. A large window overlooked downtown Portland, sunlight flooding in. But what caught her eye was the oversized photograph hanging across from her bed. A glossy, high-resolution print of the Foster family. Her father Everett in a sharp suit, her mother Elise poised and distant, and beside them, her older brother Nathan, looking every bit the successor to the empire their family built. And there at the end was her, smiling, pretending, playing her role. The knock at the door barely registered. "Camille?" a voice said. She turned slowly as Nathan entered, still dressed like he was walking into a board meeting. "You're awake," he said, approaching with careful steps. Camille swallowed. "Don't start." "6 months, Camille," Nathan said, adjusting the blanket on her lap like she was a child. "Do you have any idea what you put this family through?" I left a note. "I need to find my own way" is not a strategy. It's a tantrum. "You're 28, not 18. She turned her face toward the window. Snowflakes drifted outside, soft and aimless. "We'll spin this as a planned sabbatical," Nathan continued. "The press conference is being arranged. We'll announce your return, highlight your recovery. You'll be back in the office before the end of the quarter." "No," she said. He froze. "Excuse me?" "No," she repeated. "This isn't a sabbatical. I left because I couldn't breathe in that world anymore." Nathan straightened. "Camille, you are a Foster. That name means something." "Yeah," she said bitterly. "It means contracts, cover-ups, controlling every inch of my life." Nathan's expression flickered. Confusion, maybe even concern, but it passed quickly. "The man who pulled you from the river, Daniel Reyes," he said, switching tactics. "A janitor. The media's already calling him a hero. We'll thank him properly, of course." Quietly. Camille sat up a little, ignoring the protest from her body. "I want to see him." Nathan blinked. "What?" "I want to thank him myself. He doesn't want attention. Our team reached out. He refused any compensation. Maybe he doesn't want money," she said, more to herself than him. "There's nothing for you in his world, Camille. He's working class. A mechanic, for God's sake. He has a kid." Camille's gaze sharpened. "A daughter named Anna. She made me a card." Nathan sighed. "Camille." "I want to see it," she said firmly. A nurse entered, tablet in hand. "Miss Foster, time for your medication." "And," she added with a small smile, "there's a little girl downstairs who sent you a get well card. She asked if you got it." Camille held out her hand. The nurse passed it to her. It was made from folded purple construction paper, decorated with glitter and a crayon drawing of someone being pulled from water. Inside, in neat, careful handwriting, "Dear River Lady, I'm glad you're okay. My dad saved you. Love, Anna Reyes." Camille stared at the name. Reyes. The nurse left quietly. "You're obsessing," Nathan said. "This man is a footnote, a passing event." Camille didn't respond. She was still staring at the card. "He risked his life," she said finally. "Not for who I am, but because someone needed help." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're being naive." "No," she whispered, her fingers brushing the glitter. "I'm being real." She turned to him, voice suddenly cold. "Get out, Nathan. If you won't support me, then at least respect me. This is a mistake. If you don't leave, I'll tell the press exactly why I left. Every detail, every boardroom lie, every scandal Dad buried." Nathan's face darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." They stared at each other, a silent war of wills. Camille didn't blink. Eventually he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Camille sat alone, her hands trembling slightly as she looked again at Anna's drawing. The man who had pulled her from the water had a daughter who saw her not as a headline, not as an heiress, but as a person worth caring about. Camille didn't know where the road ahead would lead, but for the first time in years she wanted to find out. Daniel hadn't planned to come, even after the hospital called, even after Anna's art teacher showed him the crayon drawing she'd made that morning, another card for the lady from the river. Even after Anna's big, hopeful eyes asked, "Can we bring it to her?" He still hadn't planned on it, but here he was anyway, standing just outside room 412 at Portland General. Anna's small hand wrapped tightly in his. The nurse smiled gently. "She's been asking about you both." The door creaked open to reveal a room far larger than their entire apartment, Soft music played in the background. Fresh flowers lined every surface. It looked more like a hotel suite than a recovery room, and there, sitting upright in bed with a blanket over her legs, was Camille Foster. She looked nothing like the glossy photos Daniel had seen on the news. Her hair was loose, slightly messy, no makeup, no posture perfected for the camera. Just a woman, recovering, alive. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Daniel knew she remembered everything too. "You came," she said softly, her voice a little raspy, but clear. Anna took a step forward, holding her new drawing out in both hands. "We brought you another card." Camille's face lit up. She reached for it like it was something precious. "You must be Anna," she said. "I got your first card. It's right there." She pointed to her nightstand where the glittery purple construction paper stood upright, proudly displayed beside a vase of lilies. "This one's our house," Anna explained, climbing carefully onto the edge of the bed. "And our cat, even though we don't have one yet. Daddy says maybe someday, when things are more settled." Daniel's voice came from behind her. "We're working on it." Camille looked at him, a softness in her eyes he didn't expect. "Thank you," she said, "for not waiting." Daniel looked down, suddenly feeling awkward in his work boots and patched jacket. Anyone would have done the same. "Yeah." "No," Camille said gently. "They wouldn't have." For a long moment the room was quiet, not uncomfortable, just full. Full of things unsaid, and yet somehow understood. Anna was already making herself at home, pointing at the IV pole and asking if it hurt. Camille smiled, answering patiently, never once speaking down to her. It felt natural. "I brought you crayons too," Anna said proudly, "in case you get bored." Camille laughed, a real unguarded laugh. "That's perfect. I haven't colored in years." Daniel stood back, watching the two of them talk like they'd known each other for longer than a few hours in this lifetime. Children, he thought, they see people as people. No headlines, no barriers, just hearts. There was a knock at the door. Detective Patel stepped in, notebook under her arm. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "Just need a few final clarifications." Daniel stiffened, but Camille raised a hand. "Can it wait, Detective?" she asked. "Anna was about to tell me about her school's art show." The detective paused, glanced between them, then smiled slightly. "Of course." As she left, Daniel turned to Camille. "I'm sorry about all this. The reporters, the attention. We didn't ask for any of it." Camille shook her head. "No, Daniel, you didn't ask for it. You didn't even want to be found. That says a lot." He shifted, uneasy. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said, "but I still want to say thank you. Not just for the rescue, but for what you did after. You walked away. You gave me privacy. You didn't sell my name." "I'm not interested in attention," he muttered. "I'm interested in truth," she replied. "And I think you are too." There was a pause. Then Anna spoke up, entirely sincere. "Miss Camille, do you want to come to my art show?" Daniel started to interrupt, to tell her not to pressure people recovering in hospitals, but Camille leaned in. "I'd love to," she said. Anna beamed, and Daniel, against all logic, felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. Hope. By the end of the week, Daniel's quiet world had begun to unravel. It started with a phone call from Anna's school, then two more, then the front page of the Oregon Sentinel, where a blurry photo of him and Anna leaving the hospital ran under the headline, "Local Hero's Family Connected to Missing Tech Heiress." He stopped answering his phone, changed the route they took to school, started picking up Anna early, just in case. But it didn't matter. The reporters kept coming. At the garage, Tony pulled him aside, concern written all over his grease-smudged face. Some suits came by, asking questions. Not cops, corporate. "You okay, man?" "I'm fine," Daniel muttered. Tony hesitated. Look, if you need to take time off, I need the hours, Daniel said firmly. I'll deal with the rest. But he didn't know how to deal with it. By Monday, a news van was parked outside their building. By Tuesday, a woman claiming to be a journalist followed Anna halfway to school before a neighbor intervened. It all came to a head on Wednesday afternoon when Detective Patel showed up at the garage. "This isn't official business," she said, pulling a file folder from under her coat. "But I thought you should see this." Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, frowning. "What is it?" "The real story behind the Foster family," she said, tapping the folder. "Not the magazine version." "I don't want it," he said, pushing it back toward her. "You sure? Because their PR machine is about to paint you either as a lucky hero or a scheming opportunist, depending on how Camille handles this." Daniel looked away. "She's not like them." "I agree," Patel said quietly, "but that doesn't mean her world isn't dangerous." He exhaled slowly. "I'm just trying to protect my daughter." "Then do what you've been doing," she said. "Tell the truth, and be careful who you trust." Later that evening, back at their apartment, Daniel found Camille waiting outside their door, wearing jeans and a borrowed hoodie, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. "I texted, but I wasn't sure you'd answer," she said. "I turned my phone off," he replied. "Reporters found us again today. One followed Anna." Camille's face fell. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know it had gotten that bad." "It's not your fault," Daniel said. "It's your brother's." She winced. "Nathan's trying to manage the story. He thinks he's protecting me." "He's not," Daniel said. "He's exposing us." There was a long silence. Then Camille reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I think you should read this," she said, handing it to him. Daniel hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a letter from a law firm, a petition for custody review, filed on behalf of concerned parties regarding the stability and safety of Daniel Reyes. His jaw clenched. "He's trying to take my daughter?" Camille looked stricken. "I didn't know. I swear, Daniel, I had no part in this." Daniel stepped back, stunned. "He thinks I'm unfit because I clean floors and fix cars?" "Because you're not part of the narrative," she whispered. "I don't want to be part of any narrative," Daniel said. "I just want to raise my kid." "I know." She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I left that life because I was drowning in it," Camille said. "You saved me from more than just the river, Daniel. And now, I want to fight with you. For Anna. For peace. For something real." His eyes met hers. It would have been easier to shut the door, to walk away, to protect Anna by isolating them again. But he couldn't ignore what was happening or what was growing between them. "All right," he said softly. "Let's fight." The gym at Roosevelt Elementary buzzed with the sounds of folding chairs scraping against hardwood, PTA moms setting up the snack table, and kids running wild with construction paper projects in their hands. It was the school's annual art show, and Anna had been talking about it for weeks. Daniel stood near the back wall, arms crossed, trying to stay out of the way. He kept glancing toward the entrance, uneasy. He wasn't sure if she'd actually come, but then the doors opened, and Camille stepped inside. She wasn't in a designer dress, no makeup team, no entourage, just jeans, a simple sweater, and her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked more like a parent than an heiress, more like someone who belonged here. Anna spotted her first. "Miss Camille," she squealed, running over. Camille crouched just in time to catch her in a hug, laughing. "You made it," Anna said, beaming. "You said you would." "I wouldn't miss it," Camille said. "Now where's your masterpiece?" Anna grabbed her hand and led her proudly to the display board, where a series of colorful crayon drawings hung beneath her name. One picture showed 3 people holding hands in front of a small house, labeled "My Family." Another showed someone diving into a river to save someone else. "That one's about Daddy saving you," Anna said. "I drew it for class." Camille's smile faltered for just a moment, emotion catching her off guard. Daniel stepped beside them, watching quietly. "She's been working on these all month." They're beautiful, Camille said softly, still holding Anna's hand. Just then, Principal Evans tapped the mic at the front of the gym. If everyone could find a seat, we have a quick announcement before the students share their projects. Camille's expression shifted, calm, focused. I asked for a moment to speak, she told Daniel. His brows drew together. Are you sure? She nodded. It's time. He didn't stop her. Camille stepped onto the small stage, ignoring the handful of parents whispering as cameras from 2 local stations turned her way. She didn't flinch. Hi, she began, voice steady. I know most of you recognize me. I'm Camille Foster. A hush fell across the gym. I was missing for 6 months. You saw the stories, the headlines, but what none of them told you was why I left. Daniel stiffened, heart thudding. Anna slipped her hand into his. I left because I was tired of pretending, Camille continued. Tired of smiling through board meetings and gala speeches while feeling hollow inside. I needed something real, so I disappeared. I worked in a bookstore, took the bus, made coffee for strangers. I was nobody, and I was free. She paused. Then one morning I fell through the ice, and a man, Daniel Reyes, jumped in to save me. He didn't know who I was. He didn't care. He just heard someone scream and didn't wait for permission to help. All eyes turned toward Daniel. He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable under the attention. Since then, his daughter Anna has reminded me what it means to be brave and kind. What it means to see people as people, not headlines or bank accounts. Camille reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is my resignation from Foster Tech and from the Foster Foundation, she said clearly. Effective immediately. Gasps echoed across the room. One reporter dropped their phone. I'm not returning to that life. I've enrolled in classes at Portland Community College. Auto repair, she added with a smile toward Daniel and Anna. I've moved into a small apartment near Roosevelt Elementary, and I plan to live a quiet, honest life, one that I choose. She looked at Daniel, then at Anna. Her voice softened. I'm building a new kind of future, one based on love, not legacy. The room was silent. Then slowly one parent began to clap. Another followed. Soon the entire gym was on its feet. Daniel watched from the crowd, stunned. Anna looked up at him, eyes wide. She said love, Daddy. He nodded, his throat thick. Yeah, she did. Camille stepped down, and before she reached them, Anna raced into her arms again. Daniel stood, and when Camille looked up at him, he saw no traces of the woman from the magazines. Only the one standing here, choosing them. It started with small things. Camille showed up at Tony's garage one Friday afternoon, holding a coffee cup and a clipboard. I thought you might need help organizing the inventory sheets, she said. Daniel looked up from under the hood of a Ford with a skeptical eyebrow. You know this is a mechanic shop, right? Not a boardroom? She smiled. I figured I'd start where I'm useful. At first, she kept to the side, watching, learning. She asked about engine parts and oil filters, taking notes like she was studying for an exam. Daniel teased her when she confused a wrench for a ratchet, and she took it in stride. A week later, she showed up in overalls. You serious about this? Daniel asked, wiping grease off his hands. Camille nodded. Dead serious. I even brought my own gloves. He handed her a socket set. Fine. Let's see what you got. They worked in tandem, him explaining, her trying. She scraped her knuckles, cursed softly under her breath, and grinned every time she got something right. The shop had never felt so alive. Meanwhile, at home, things shifted too. Camille found a small apartment 2 blocks from Roosevelt Elementary. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a kitchen with avocado green tiles. But it was hers, and more than that, it was near them. She started walking Anna to school some mornings, helped with homework in the afternoons. They baked cookies once, badly, painted pumpkins together for Halloween, and spent rainy evenings watching movies with popcorn and bowls way too big for their laps. Anna began calling her Miss Camille less often, and Cam more often. Daniel noticed it all. The way Camille always sat beside Anna at dinner. The way she carried a book of recipes she was trying to learn, mostly just to cook Anna's favorite chicken noodle soup. The way her laugh filled their small kitchen like it belonged there. One night, as they were locking up the shop, Camille stood by the old beat-up Mustang that Daniel had been fixing in his spare time. "This car," she said, running a hand along the rusted hood. "It was a gift from my dad when I turned 16. I never touched it, never even drove it." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "I want to fix it," she said. "With you, with Anna." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You sure? It's not a quick project. It takes time." Camille looked at him. "I have time now." That night, Anna asked if Camille could stay for dinner, then for movie night, then for breakfast the next morning. By the end of the week, she had her own toothbrush in their bathroom. It wasn't official. No one said anything out loud, but it felt right. One evening, while Camille helped Anna draw a poster for science class, Daniel stood in the doorway watching them. Camille had a smudge of green marker on her cheek, and Anna was laughing at something she said. He felt something shift in his chest, not like falling, more like landing. When Anna went to bed, Camille stayed behind, cleaning up crayons. Daniel cleared his throat. "You didn't have to stay this late." "I wanted to," she said. "Besides, we never finished the poster." He looked at her for a long moment. "You fit here." Camille met his eyes. "I know." Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just full. Daniel stepped forward, close enough to smell the lavender soap she always used, close enough to see the worry hiding behind her smile. "I still don't have much to offer," he said. "No big house, no safety net, just this life." Camille reached for his hand. "It's the life I'm choosing." He didn't pull away, didn't run, because for the first time in years he believed someone meant it. The envelope came by courier. No return address, just Daniel's name, handwritten in elegant script. He opened it at the kitchen table with Anna humming softly in the living room, cutting construction paper into shapes for her school project. Camille was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Daniel unfolded the letter slowly and stopped breathing. It was a formal petition, filed through the county court. Request for emergency custody review. Claim, unsafe environment due to excessive media exposure, unstable financial conditions, and lack of consistent guardianship. Camille saw his face before she saw the paper. "What's wrong?" Daniel held it up. She read the first line, and her expression changed instantly. "Who?" she asked, voice tight. "Nathan," Daniel said. "It has to be." Camille's grip tightened on the letter. "He wouldn't." Daniel looked at her sharply. She corrected herself. "No, he would." Just then Anna peeked in, holding up her half-finished project. "Daddy, do you think the sun should go in the top corner or in the middle?" Daniel forced a smile. "Top corner, sunshine, just like always." She grinned and disappeared back into the other room. He lowered his voice. "They're saying I can't protect her, that I've exposed her." Camille sat down across from him. "This isn't about Anna. It's about control. Nathan's trying to pressure me, use you to force me back." "Well, it's working," Daniel muttered. "He's playing chess, and we're still learning the rules." Camille shook her head. "Then it's time we flip the board." That evening, Camille made a call. The next morning, Detective Patel showed up at their door with a folder of her own. "I've been watching Nathan Foster's moves for months," she said, "but using Child Protective Services as leverage? That's new. And dirty." Daniel leaned on the counter, jaw tight. "Can they actually take her?" "They can try," Patel said. "But it's going to get ugly. Fast." Camille stood. "Then we fight." Patel handed over the paperwork. "You'll need a lawyer, one who understands family court and corporate power plays." "I know someone," Camille said. Daniel sighed. "I'm just a janitor. a part-time mechanic. How do I fight a billionaire with legal teams and political friends? Camille reached for his hand. You're not fighting alone anymore. They didn't sleep much that night. Daniel watched Anna curled up on the couch with her favorite blanket, unaware that her entire world was being contested in a boardroom somewhere. Camille sat beside him, silent, steady. At some point, she whispered, I left my family to find peace, and now they're trying to destroy yours. Daniel looked at her. You didn't bring this on us, Camille, but I brought me, and I'm glad you did, he said, because even now, with lawyers circling and custody hearings looming, he wouldn't trade what they had for anything, not even safety, not even certainty, because what they had was real, and that made it worth fighting for. A week later, Daniel found himself sitting in a small conference room at the city courthouse, papers spread in front of him, heart pounding like a drum. Anna was at school, Camille was beside him, and across the table sat their lawyer, a calm, silver-haired woman named Eleanor Vasquez, who had a reputation for taking on corporate giants and winning. Camille reached for Daniel's hand under the table. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Not for me. I'm not doing it for you, she replied. I'm doing it with you. The lawyer cleared her throat. Before we file the response to the custody petition, there's something else we should talk about. Something Camille requested. Daniel glanced at her. What is it? Camille hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a single-page document. I want to start the process to adopt Anna, she said softly. If you'll let me. Daniel froze, not because he was shocked, but because deep down he'd hoped for this, feared it, prayed for it, doubted it, all at once. She already calls you Cam, he said. She already hugs you like your family. I don't want to replace Maria, Camille said quickly. I know I can't. I don't even want Anna to stop talking about her. I want to be part of her story too. Daniel looked down at the document. The line for adoptive parent name already had Camille's careful handwriting. He exhaled slowly. You really want this? Camille nodded. I want all of it. The bedtime stories, the school projects, the hard days and the good ones. I want to be her mom on earth. He smiled faintly. That's what Anna calls you now, when she thinks I'm not listening. Later that night, they sat together at the kitchen table, Daniel, Camille, and Anna, reviewing drawings for a new family project Anna had started. It was a crayon timeline of their story. At the beginning, a man jumping into a river. In the middle, a woman in a hospital bed holding a child's hand. And at the end, 3 people under a sun in front of a little house with one word written in bright yellow across the top. Family. Is it okay if I call her mom sometimes? Anna asked, looking between them. Not instead of mommy in heaven, just like mom here. Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at Camille. She nodded, blinking back tears. He turned to Anna. Sunshine, he said, voice soft. You can call her whatever feels right in your heart. Anna smiled. Okay, Daddy. She crawled into Camille's lap without another word. And just like that, without lawyers or courtrooms or signatures, something shifted. They weren't just a man, a woman, and a child anymore. They were a family, not by blood, but by choice. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Camille asked Daniel to meet her at the garage early. The sky was still gray, the streets mostly empty. Daniel pulled up in his truck, expecting to help with some inventory or maybe look at a customer's car that came in late. But when he walked in, the bay doors were already open. The old Mustang parked at the center like it had been waiting for something, or someone. Camille stood beside it, nervously fidgeting with the zipper of her hoodie. She wasn't wearing work gloves today, no clipboard, just a soft smile and a strange look in her eyes. Hope mixed with something more fragile. Daniel stepped closer. What's going on? I wanted to show you something, she said, reaching into the pocket of her jeans. She pulled out a small velvet box. Daniel blinked. Camille, let me say it, she interrupted gently. She opened the box to reveal a simple gold band. No diamonds, no branding, just one tiny engraving on the inside. Worth the dive. I bought it with my first full paycheck from the bookstore, she said. I wanted it to be mine, not my family's, not my trust funds, just mine. Daniel's breath caught. I know we didn't start this the usual way, Camille continued, and I know life with me hasn't exactly been simple. But every morning I see you make breakfast for Anna, or help her with homework, or show her how to change a tire. I think this is what love looks like. Quiet, steady, brave. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. So, Daniel Reyes, will you marry me? For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he reached out and took the ring from the box, turned it over in his rough fingers. You know I don't have much, he said. No big wedding plans. No honeymoon. No. I don't want any of that, she said, stepping closer. I just want us. Daniel slid the ring onto his finger. It's a yes, he said quietly. Always was. Before she could answer, they both heard the door creak open. Did she do it yet? Anna's voice echoed across the garage. They turned to see her grinning from ear to ear, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. She practiced the speech 3 times last night with me and Mrs. Garcia, Anna whispered to Daniel with a giggle. Camille laughed, blushing. You weren't supposed to tell him that. I wanted it to be perfect, Anna shrugged. Because you're perfect. For us. Daniel dropped to one knee and pulled her into a hug. Not just perfect, he whispered. Ours. They celebrated that afternoon in the garage with lemonade in paper cups and a chocolate cake Mrs. Garcia had delivered with a note. Sometimes families are built with more heart than history. Tony stopped by with car parts. Pablo brought balloons. Detective Patel arrived late, holding a bottle of sparkling cider and declaring herself chief of security for the wedding. Daniel looked around at the people who had become their circle. Messy, unconventional, but real. And he realized this wasn't just a new chapter. It was a whole new story. And for once, he couldn't wait to see how it turned out. The sign above the garage door now read, Reyes and Foster Family Auto Repair. And underneath, in smaller hand-painted letters, where every fix builds something stronger. It had been a year since Daniel pulled Camille from the icy river, since Anna made her first glittery card, since a life of chaos began to quietly transform into something deeply rooted and real. The garage was thriving, not because of flashy marketing or high-end clients, but because people trusted them. They came for the repairs and stayed for the warmth, for the coffee always hot in the corner, for the way Camille explained invoices like a teacher and Daniel remembered your dog's name, for the way Anna, now proudly wearing her own mini uniform, handed out lollipops to waiting customers. She even had a nameplate on the desk. Anna Reyes Foster, Junior Manager of Customer Smiles. Camille had finished her auto repair course and now handled both the books and brake pads with equal confidence. She still wasn't great with spark plugs, but she could change oil with the best of them. Daniel had stopped working night shifts. The shop paid the bills. The house near Roosevelt Elementary was home, and more importantly, it was theirs. One sunny afternoon, Daniel stood by the open bay doors, wiping his hands as Anna came running from the school bus with a paper in hand. I got the part, she shouted. What part? The lead, she grinned. In the school play, I get to be the sun in the end scene. Camille appeared behind her, laughing. That feels right, Anna beamed. Because I shine? No, Daniel said. Because you light up everything you're near. Later that evening, they gathered in the backyard. Mrs. Garcia brought empanadas. Tony and Pablo showed up with folding chairs. Detective Patel dropped off a tiny grill she insisted was a late wedding gift. They ate under string lights Daniel had hung himself, next to a garden Camille had planted with Anna. Half roses, half tomato plants. Practical and beautiful, just like everything they were building. As night fell, Camille handed Daniel a worn photo album. "What's this?" he asked. "Memories," she said. Inside were snapshots, Anna's art show, Camille's first oil change, Daniel's surprised face the day they got their first five-star Yelp review, their wedding photo, taken in front of the Mustang they rebuilt together, with Anna throwing confetti made of paper hearts. At the very back was a blank page. "What's this one for?" he asked. "Our next chapter," Camille smiled. "We're just getting started." Daniel pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Anna curled up beside them with her favorite stuffed animal and a plate of cookies she decorated herself. The sounds of laughter filled the air. The garage lights dimmed. The world outside kept spinning. But inside their little corner of it, everything was exactly how it should be. Not perfect, not easy, but true. And that, they'd learned, was more than enough.